And good day, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us. Good to be back on the air after being away for a while, and very happy to have alongside today now former longtime Swanton Village Trustee, Eugene LaBombard. Gene, thanks for coming in. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I thought we could knock off a half hour easily and just go back on some of your tenure. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts about Swanton, but give us, and you probably have done this before, give us a little background on yourself. I know Ayers Laboratory, is that where you worked for many years in Rouse's Point?
I had gone to St. Michael's College.
So St. Mike's grad.
And I majored in chemistry, of all things.
Wow.
There were 13 of us out of a group of 300.
Is that right, 13?
Yeah, which was pretty good.
Huh.
And 3 of us ended up at Ayers Labs.
Really?
One of them came in a year or so later. However, I did my thing and went to school at night and advanced especially my understanding of math.
Huh.
So,
and Ayers, we're talking a big-time player. We're talking hundreds of employees in their heyday, or we were not that big?
Well, when I started there in 1965, which is quite a while ago now, there were about 350 to 400.
Wow, and this
employees.
is Rouse's Point we're talking,
That's
right?
correct.
Wow.
And when I moved to the New York City area to remain with the research group,
Yeah.
there were about 1,400 in Rouse's Point.
Really? Wow.
And the time that,
Wow.
from this time I started until the time I transferred to the New York area,
Yeah.
the animal health facility had been done and was finished in Chazy, New York. I don't know if you remember that.
Huh, I guess I don't remember that.
Well, there were a lot of animal studies were done there,
Really?
and of course the Chazy district was well known for doing that sort of thing.
Oh, really?
And I
Huh.
think there were about 450 people there.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And of course, Rouse's Point had become kind of busy and was overcrowded.
I bet.
And about 50 or 60 people had been moved from the clinical manufacturing area
Yeah.
to Plattsburgh
Wow.
to ship, drugs and
Yeah.
investigational drugs.
Boy,
shall we
what a
say.
big time. And when did that shut down? How that's been gone for years, has it not?
Well, let me think. I retired out of the facility in Pearl River, New York, which is down on the New Jersey border across from the city. The company was sold to Wyeth. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It eventually became Wyeth because
Okay.
we had merged with them. We were
Yeah.
both held by the same group. So
Yeah.
I was with Wyeth Ayers Research, and 2 years after I retired, Pfizer bought them.
Okay.
And interesting to see occasionally ads on TV.
Yeah.
The reason they wanted us was because of our pipeline.
Because of the pipeline.
Yeah, because of the development of some new drugs. And occasionally I'll see something familiar.
Really interesting.
It is rather interesting.
So it sounds like you had a very, very good career with those folks.
I was very, very lucky.
Yeah.
I was oftentimes thinking of moving to another company or something like that when some development would take place.
Yeah.
And I had reason to advance, so I did so.
Interesting. And so you've had obviously living in Swanton for a long time. How'd you happen to get involved in Swanton Village government?
Oh, that's interesting.
And that goes back a few. And again, you just finished again. You decided not to run again at the a couple months ago at the town meeting. But that had been your second stint on the village board.
The first 10, 11 years were from the mid '80s. I don't know if you recall, we had an oil crisis in the late '70s, and Ormond Croft took that to heart. If you remember Ormond.
In fact, I've often mentioned this to you folks. I showed up in November 1975, having finished college in North Carolina, and Ormond was absolutely the first kind of municipal official who I really got to deal with. And as I've said, I think many times on shows with you folks, never forget Ormond. He was just a great guy, and
really
probably about the best municipal official around here I've ever dealt with. So yeah, I remember Ormond well.
So starting back at the beginning of all this, I kind of took an interest in things in the early '70s, and I was I volunteered to be a member of either zoning or planning, and they had a joint commission at that time, and they waited for a year or so, and then they split. They had both,
Okay.
and I went on the planning commission for must have been until 1985ish or
Really,
so.
so a long time on planning.
Yeah, so I knew some of the officials.
I bet.
And of course, I was very close at that time to Leon Babby.
Huh.
Leon was,
Who was village president for many, many years, of course, the MVU principal.
yeah, correct. So and he had his eye on me too, because apparently we had a trustee that moved out of the area.
Huh.
And they offered it, I think, to Dick Thompson, and he had, actually, it wasn't a trustee that moved out, it was Alfred Hakey, and he resigned for some reason. It had something to do with insurance or something,
Huh.
but I don't remember the details. But at any rate, somebody in that group, I might have been Jerome Duffy
Oh, yeah, Jerry Duffy.
and Liam Babby, talked to Orman and said, go talk to Jane.
Interesting.
So that started it. I
Interesting.
remember the meeting took about 5 minutes when they appointed me to the remainder of Alfred's term.
Huh.
And the first thing that Orman did was take me up to Highgate Falls, where we have become involved with the improvements and the expansion of the hydro facilities up there.
In fact, I've mentioned this on the show a bunch of times. I literally remember Orman because I was, reporting for the Courier Free Press doing radio news.
Sure.
And I can literally remember Orman giving me a call saying, Richard, we finally got our relicensing for the Highgate Falls,
Yeah,
Highgate Falls Dam.
we'll talk
Something
about-
that you folks are, the village, of course, is involved with again these days.
Yeah, I was very involved with that because
Huh.
I believed in the renewable energy which
Yeah.
was offered by hydro,
Yeah.
and I still firmly believe in that. When the water goes over the dam,
Yeah,
let's not waste it.
yeah.
But at any rate, that started my career,
Interesting.
and I stayed through the actual expansion process,
Huh.
and it was obviously very interesting because I was able to see things that people
Really
today probably wouldn't even remember.
interesting.
On the fourth generator, I saw the work that went right down to bedrock.
Is that
And I
right?
saw the construction and
Wow.
the installation of that new generator from Siemens.
Interesting.
That was it was very, very heartwarming for me to have it
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And about the time that it was essentially complete is when I was transferred. Well, I didn't have to go, I wasn't a slave.
Yeah.
But I wanted to stay with the research group with the Wyeth people.
Huh.
And that was very well worthwhile as well.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate in that respect. This is something that not a lot of people know. Some of the scientists I worked with in Pearl River were some of the best in the world.
Really, really.
There's no
Wow.
question.
Wow.
There was one man that kind of adopted me, and he was from Camden, Maine,
Huh.
originally. But it's a special technique, NMR spectroscopy and that sort of thing, and he was an expert.
Wow.
And I had never really fully understood half of what he knew,
Interesting.
but it was good, and of course a lot of other people that I knew came from all over the world.
Huh. So how long were you down there on that? After
About
that trip?
10 years,
Wow.
a little over. Well, officially maybe 11 or 12, but
Did you keep your house in Swanton, or did you?
we did. It was
Really?
a big challenge
Huh.
to decide. The children were all out of the nest at that point in
Wow.
time, and Louise was a nurse in Burlington at the neonatal intensive care unit,
Wow.
and she didn't want to leave that,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to leave our home as such because we'd spend a lot of time
Sure.
and money in it.
Yeah.
So we stayed, and I traveled
Interesting.
back and forth.
Is that right? So for 10 years we're
A
talking?
little bit over. I had
Wow.
learned that cars can go a long way if you take care of them.
That's interesting.
So I was putting about 150 to 200,000 miles on a car.
Wow, I thought I did a lot of driving at about 30 to 35,000. And it's funny you mentioned that. Just coming back from a long road trip for myself.
Yeah.
Had a horrible drive. I should know perhaps we're taping this show on, where are we, Tuesday, I guess you mentioned, Tuesday, April 29th. Came back Saturday. And sorry, the Maple Festival had such lousy weather, but I just had a horrible drive coming up the throughway on I-87 from Newburgh all the way up here, just in the rain and fog.
With the fog.
But boy, so you did that drive a million times.
Yeah, I did.
Or some of that drive.
I didn't do it every week, but almost every week. And
really?
I'd put around 35,000.
Wow.
It was around 300 miles
Yeah.
down to my apartment there.
Yeah.
And that was interesting, too, because
Boy.
somebody at work, another scientist who was very kind, had a friend who was a lady that owned a building, and she rented an apartment.
Huh.
So I was able to move in there. That was very, very, very good. Very good.
But you eventually came back to Swanton and ended up back on the as a trustee again at some
Well,
point.
that was interesting. I had no special interest in it.
Yeah.
But Aaron Messier moved out of town,
Huh.
so they needed somebody.
Yeah.
So Neil Spear came to the door one day and, hi, how are you, and all that sort of thing, and asked me a question.
Huh.
And I answered it. I says, yes, I will fulfill the remainder of that term, but keep in mind, I have the right to resign anytime I feel like it.
Huh. Interesting.
So, as it turned out, I almost resigned a year ago
Oh, really?
because of sickness and well, my wife's especially.
Yeah.
And I had a bad bout with pneumonia last June and July, and that was emergency room kind of thing.
Huh.
And I almost did because Louise had some surgery through there, so I wasn't really doing my job as a trustee. So I almost resigned.
Oh, really?
And then I talked with Adam and Susie, and let me see it through.
Yeah.
I think it was Adam's word. He said.
Wow.
So I did.
Well, good for you. But it wasn't easy. You didn't give really any thought to running again this last town meeting day, or not much thought?
Not much thought.
Not much thought.
Not much thought.
Well, it
thought
sounds like
about
you paid your dues big time, Gene.
And then, actually, my duties were at home.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, well, taking care of a couple of cats, and especially Louise, and the household duties that go with owning a home.
Yeah.
I'm usually free around 10 o'clock in the morning.
Interesting. Here you are.
Unless we have appointments, and of course we have a lot of doctor's appointments now.
And interestingly, Neil Spear ends up being the person to succeed you on the Village Board of Trustees.
Yes.
Having lost his close election a year earlier as village president.
Yeah.
Interesting. So obviously the biggest news in Swanton for over a year now has been just the effort to try to get an expanded police department with the public safety building that went down to a very decisive defeat 2 town meetings ago, and then kind of a revamp project with the electric department building, which went down to a close defeat at town meeting 2025, and now the trustees have kind of reworked that a bit, and we're coming up for a third vote on the project, or a project, on May 6th. Again, the last vote was very tight.
Yes.
How do you see this one? Maybe another tight vote, or?
I see it as being approved,
Yeah.
but I think it is going to be tight.
Did you think, when the vote came up at town meeting day, did you think you'd get approval for it then?
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, you weren't sure.
I wasn't sure at all. I know that my feelings were that we have to do something soon.
Yeah.
The buildings we're in are 50 years old,
Yeah.
and we try to maintain them as well as we can.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of misinformation. But I remember some things years ago, or a year and a half ago, people talking about our original proposal for expansion, talking about why you haven't done this, you haven't done that. But as I think over the years, there's a lot of things been done to that building. New roof, new garage doors, more efficient heating systems, and so on. So it was never left out of the picture.
Yeah.
But people believe that we weren't taking care of it.
Really?
And in some ways, we weren't. I mean, we don't pave the driveways and the parking lot every year, so there's some little holes here and there.
Yeah.
However, we did the best we could.
Yeah.
One of the things I do think about recently, maybe it's because it's the time of year,
Yeah.
we should have spent more money on our streets,
Huh.
but we always were aware of the taxpayer.
Sure.
So we kept things kind of tight. And that's one of the areas where I think we should have loosened it up a little
Yeah,
bit,
really.
because the streets are terrible.
Yeah. Is that right? You think the streets are not in very good shape? Huh?
They're not. I think the main thoroughfare, First Street
Yeah.
and through to Route 7 on 78, going
Yeah.
through the village and all the trucks that we have,
Yeah.
you can see the price we pay.
Yeah. And of course, the truck traffic, as anybody knows, Swanton, just
It's heavy.
and heavy truck traffic.
It is constant. And in the summertime, it seems to be a little heavier.
Yeah.
It may not be so this year because of maybe we don't know what the Canadian traffic is going to be.
Yeah.
But it may be a little less, but I don't anticipate that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of activity.
Yeah. I guess the hope is anyway when the folks north of the border complete the last segment of kind of the interstate highway that'll come in right pretty much to the border. I guess the hope is whenever that's done, that might ease. But is that a realistic hope, or do you think that probably won't be worth much, or hard to say?
I don't know the date of completion,
And
but
I'm
I
not
suspect
sure, yeah.
I suspect it's stopped, but I don't know that.
Yeah.
I have no knowledge.
I
You
asked the
might
question
build
when
it.
I cross the border at time. I never get a firm answer on that.
You might ask Bill.
Yeah.
You know,
Good question.
Good question for Bill.
Yeah.
He may have more information.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's something else that I was very fortunate to. I say it this way. I reported to 4 different village managers.
Really?
Which is
Interesting.
obviously the reverse of that.
Yeah.
But it was Orman,
Yeah.
George,
Yeah. George Legue.
and then Reg, and,
Yeah.
and now Bill.
Yeah.
That's unusual, I
Yeah.
think.
Huh.
I don't know. Maybe I'm lucky.
And you feel
But
like
they
the
were
village
all-
has done pretty well with their village managers.
Obviously, they were all different.
Yeah.
Some were better with picking out good people. Others were
Yeah.
more technically oriented.
Yeah.
But they all were very, very dedicated to the village,
Yeah.
and that was a wonderful thing,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. No, it sounds like you've done pretty well on that front.
I think so.
I know, just as a reporter, George Legue wasn't the easiest person for me to deal with, but not saying anything against his village. He was just a little tougher. The other folks
Yep.
have been,
He was a
anyway.
little rough around the outside.
And of course, he was a big electric department. His
He certainly
background
was. He certainly was.
definitely on top of that.
Got kind of a silly little story here. When
Huh.
I transferred to New York and I resigned my position,
Yeah.
I don't know who took my place, but I think Ed Daniel did. But that's
Oh,
beside
yeah.
the point.
Yeah.
My point is, I spoke to George as I resigned and said, listen, we have one real source of energy, electrical energy,
Yeah.
coming into the village.
Yeah.
And he says, when I'm gone, I want that improved.
Huh.
And when I came back and retired, George was still a manager.
Yeah.
And I said, by the way, I says, remember I told you we needed a second source of energy in this village?
Huh.
Did you do it?
Huh.
He said, no. There's 3 of them.
Huh. Really interesting.
So it kind of shocked me. But he had listened.
Yeah.
And, when power went out, this past summer, when a truck backed over a pole,
Yeah.
it was out a second or 2.
Yeah.
That's it.
No, it
The
sounds
other
like.
systems picked up immediately.
Yeah, no, it sounds like Swanton Village Electric. I've run into a few people who would love to be a customer of Swanton Village Electric, but no, it sounds like it's a very solid department.
It is.
And still, the third lowest, and that may change with this project, but at the moment, third lowest electricity
About
rates in
that.
the state, about that.
Yeah, it's 3 or 4, depending on
Yeah.
how much you're using and whether
Yeah.
you're industrial or
Yeah.
residential and that sort of thing. But It's right there.
Yeah.
Out of a group of about 12 or 15.
Wow. Interesting.
That's quite a few.
Issues come up. I've mentioned this before, and I know it's a concern for you folks, but it just seems like hydro, in your opinion, and probably mine, just doesn't seem to get the respect kind of it deserves as a renewable energy source. It seems like there's some folks who just aren't that high on hydro.
Well, so maybe because we don't sell it well enough, and we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
However, there's also a group that believes that there shouldn't be any dams.
Right. Of course, you've been running into that for years. The folks in
Sure.
Montpelier, a group who would love for you to get rid of the lower village dam. Is that the?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
again, I bring up a point.
Yeah.
I had a lady that lived next door to me. I live on the river
Yeah.
in the village, and I was in the backyard talking to this lady who passed away about 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the lower dam.
Yeah.
It must have been 10, 15 years ago
Huh.
when we had a vote.
Yeah, there was a non-binding vote
Yeah.
showing strong
Sure.
support for keeping it.
She said, "What in the world are people thinking?"
Yeah.
I'm going to repeat her words.
Huh.
She asked me a question. She said, "You remember when the lake was so low, it was like 93 feet or something like that a
Yeah.
few years ago?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "There wasn't any water running."
Huh.
I said, "Well, there was a trickle." And I said, "But you could see things." She said, "You take that dam out, what do you think it's going to be from here to Highgate Falls?"
Huh. Interesting.
Good question.
Yeah.
However, I think there's still some interest in using the lower dam by other companies or other concerns, but I don't know the status of that. You might ask Bill that
I
one
think
too.
I have broached that subject. I think didn't some firm take a look at,
Yes.
and whoever the firm, I guess that decision or that conclusion was, or didn't seem to be worth it, was.
I would say it probably was not
Yeah.
of interest to them anymore, but I don't
Yeah.
know if that's a fact.
Yeah.
Because
Interesting.
there's always people thinking,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing.
Interesting.
But hydro energy as such is very useful.
Yeah.
And I might add a little bit of something here. There's a movement on the Snake and Columbia rivers out west
Wow.
where there are some huge hydroelectric facilities.
Sure.
There's a
Right.
movement out there to remove them.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things
Interesting.
that concerned me, and I'll mention it to the people here, it may not have anything to do with the state of Washington and Oregon.
Yeah.
However, when they ship wheat by barge,
Yeah.
and you take one of those dams out, all you're going to do is take one.
Yeah.
The barges can't go down to Portland anymore.
Really
And that's critical,
interesting.
because otherwise you have to move it by rail
Huh.
or truck.
Interesting.
And you're talking, I don't know how many, but it's not 50
Wow.
miles, it's hundreds.
Huh.
And that's from where the wheat.
And wheat's a huge crop in eastern Washington, eastern Oregon too. I know eastern Washington
Oh,
certainly, right?
It's
huge.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
The amount of wheat that's
Yeah.
raised and grown there is
Yeah.
unbelievable. It's
Interesting.
unbelievable. Person should see that.
Yeah.
I traveled all day one day
Yeah. Huh.
when I first arrived there, and it happened to be on a Sunday
Interesting.
in the fall.
Yeah.
And the amount of wheat being harvested that day would
Yeah.
shock you.
Wow. I had an old radio boss who moved to eastern Washington. Just been out there one time, but nice part of the country.
But there's a case where, I think there are estimates made of the Bonneville Dam serving like 250, 300,000 people.
Wow. Yeah.
And there's at least 8 or 10 dams that have generators. I
Yeah.
don't know the exact output and
Yeah.
that sort of thing, but it's huge.
Interesting.
And I believe some of them were put in during World War II, to support the development of the atomic
wow.
bomb.
Yeah. Interesting.
And I think it was Richfield, Washington.
Yeah. That sounds right.
Yeah, something like that. But at
Interesting.
any rate, I digress.
That's okay. Gene, down to about 5 minutes. So your thoughts on Swanton? Again, big project coming up for voters on May 6th, but in general, do you have pretty good feelings about Swanton? What shape do you think the village and town are in these days?
I think they're in good shape.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much aware of all of the employees in Swanton Village, and
Yeah,
I'm not
I
sure
bet.
there might be 41 or 42 now. I'm not exactly sure because
Yeah.
I'm not there. However, they're really good employees. They help each other when somebody else needs help.
Yeah.
Somebody has a piece of broken equipment, somebody else from another department jumps in and helps
Yeah.
them out and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I would be negligent to add that, we're still in the middle of our project in wastewater.
Yeah.
And that's a relatively expensive project, and
Yeah.
it's going along
Yeah.
very well.
Which voters decisively approved, a very small
Correct.
number of them, but no problem getting that approval
Correct.
a while back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that the water, potable water, is run pretty well now too.
Yeah.
We now have expanded some of the things in there, some for technical reasons and for safety reasons.
Yeah.
We now have 2 people at each of those facilities.
Huh. Oh, yeah.
So, and that's critical. And I think they're completely trained to do one another's job at both
Yeah.
of the facilities.
Huh.
So that's primarily something that's been done in the last couple of years under Bill.
Huh.
Because Bill was very much, shall we say, safety conscious,
Yeah.
and I think
Of
that's
course,
good.
his long background with Vermont State Police, of course.
I think perhaps it's some of it,
Yeah.
but
That's
he
right.
certainly has instituted some safety programs, which we probably should have done before, and I
Yeah.
never really looked at it.
Interesting. Dan, about three minutes. Sometimes I think I'm the only person who asks this question, but Swanton Village and Town merger down the road, or just not much of an issue? Who knows?
I don't think it's much of an issue at this point
Yeah.
in time. Our functions are so different.
Yeah.
The town has
Yeah.
to deal with, the land records and their own town business and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And the village is primarily, a lot of the expense is the electric department,
Yeah.
and that's a business.
Sure.
And you gotta have people
Yeah.
that run it.
Yeah.
And I'd say, I don't know how many people there are there off the top of my head, but there's at least 3 or 4 in the office, and there's 6 or 8 up at the dam,
Yeah.
and 4 or 5 line crew.
Yeah.
You know.
That's big.
But
big
think about
business.
it.
Yeah.
And the budget is high, and you
Yeah.
have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Now, that will never go away, I
Yeah.
hope,
Right.
because I think I'm very much in favor of
Yeah.
producing our own if we can.
Sure. Swanton Village and Town you folks seem to get along pretty well. Of course, I've done a million stories over the years on St. Albans City and St. Albans Town, which they've come together a lot better these days,
Yeah.
but
Seems-
sounds like you folks do pretty well, you think?
I think we try to, and we work at it.
Yeah.
I mean, we help each other. When somebody needs something, again,
Yeah,
they jump right in and
Yeah.
help each other. And that's the way it should be.
yeah. That's right. A minute and a half, I'll let you finish up. Anything you want to talk about for a minute that hasn't come up? Eugene, you got to feel pretty good about your many, many years of public service to Swanton Village.
Obviously, well, I think the thought I want to leave is that the people who are running the village and the people that are working for the village
Yeah.
are very, very thoughtful and dedicated people.
Yeah,
And not that we tried to do that, it's just maybe that's the way we interviewed them. I'm not sure.
uh,
But it has turned out that we occasionally have somebody that doesn't work out,
Yeah.
somebody that just isn't physically capable or something like that.
and I'm sure that happens
happens.
with anybody.
Sure,
Yeah.
that happens once in a while.
Yeah,
I mean, but all in all, the staff at this point in time looks pretty good to me.
yeah. And it sounds
I
like it's been
dealt with
a pretty stable workforce for the village, pretty
Yeah.
stable.
And of course, I don't usually tell people this, but at times, when I retired, I was up at associate director level.
Yeah,
That's out of a group of maybe, 10, 20,000 people. I'm
Yeah.
probably 3 from the top.
wow. Wow.
Maybe 4, but it doesn't matter. But I have seen development
Yeah,
over the years. In my personal career, I was very fortunate to have been around and needed help in the chemistry area
yeah.
when the Soviet Union dissolved.
Huh.
I was able to hire people from all over the world,
Wow.
and they were so glad to get here.
Interesting. On that note, we got to call it a day, but Gene, thanks for the time.
You're
and
welcome.
Again, kudos for a ton of time that you've given to the village of Swanton, and good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome.
Thanks to my producer, Alan Cunningham, who does the hard work around here. I'm Richard Cowperthwait. We'll see you next time here on Northwest Access TV. See ya.